The young girl never expected that her future boyfriend would actually turn out to be a pervert. Not only did he touch her all over during their very first meeting, but he even didn't spare her best friend. The male lead, together with his father, Iron Wolf, was originally a swordsman training in the tropical jungle, but after he punched the Chicken King, the two attracted a massive pursuit from all the stars and in a panic hid inside a shipping container, only to be carelessly shipped back to Japan by the workers. When the father and son caused chaos in a chicken farm, they happened to run into the Saya family women. The moment the male lead saw the Saya girls, he couldn't help himself and reached out to touch them, since he'd never met such a clean and pure girl before. At first, Saya didn't say much, but when the male lead became even bolder and tried to lift her skirt, she couldn't take it anymore and gave him a big slap. Because the two families were old acquaintances and the father and son had nowhere to go, they ended up temporarily staying at the female lead's house. The male lead, basically a bumpkin, was stunned at the sight of the huge mansion, gawking at everything as he walked and accidentally bumping into a baboon, which turned out to be Saya's grandmother. After learning why the father and son had come, Grandma took everyone to the dojo, and, after testing everyone's skills, Iron Wolf and Grandma made a deal. If the male lead could defeat the senior disciple, he'd be allowed to stay and rest. The senior disciple was a bit hesitant, but when the male lead called him Big Guy, he got fired up. As the duel started, the male lead struck first, swinging his wooden sword fiercely and forcing the senior disciple to stay on the defensive. But the old master was cleverer. No matter how much skill the male lead showed, the senior disciple stayed calm, obviously planning to exhaust his opponent. Next, both sides attacked and defended, with the senior's sword moves being simple but overwhelming, and the male lead struggling just to keep up, suffering quite a bit. Luckily, during the fight, the male lead's plugin activated, and he unexpectedly closed his eyes, turned away, and stopped resisting. The spectators were stunned. They never expected the senior disciple to lose, and the victorious male lead, not ready to let things go, threatened to take the guy back to make kebabs and entrusted himself to the female lead's family. The male lead's father left a note and departed, and now that the male lead had officially moved in, he started following Saya everywhere. Saya tried to explain the school environment to him, but the male lead misunderstood, thinking there would be many powerful creatures at school, so Saya played along and scared him by saying those people love to eat delicate dumplings like him. She thought he'd be terrified, but his first reaction was actually to protect her, proving that sincerity really is the strongest weapon. Saya was left embarrassed, so to avoid trouble, she took the male lead to the school dormitory. The male lead was just wandering around when he was targeted by Tianjin Fan. Not sensing the other's aura, the male lead was caught off guard. He wanted to fight, but Tianjin Fan ignored him, and when he tried to walk away, the male lead first faked a move, then attacked suddenly. But in just 2 moves, his wooden sword was knocked away. Only then did he realize he had met a true master. After exchanging names, the two developed a mutual respect, not yet knowing they would become each other's lifelong companions. Meanwhile, the bald guy could never have imagined that after drawing the divine wind sword, he'd turn into a ghost, and the true culprit behind it all was the infuriating Iron Sword. There wasn't any real grudge between Iron Sword and Ghost Maru, but for some reason, Iron Sword acted like a sticky plaster, always wanting to challenge Ghost Maru whenever they met. At first, Ghost Maru didn't care and thought fighting Iron Sword, whom he saw as weak, would only lower his own standard, telling him to practice more before coming back. Iron Sword hated being called weak, so when he heard that, he got furious and tried to teach Ghost Maru a lesson, only to be countered and beaten up. Watching Ghost Maru's smug face made Iron Sword's blood boil, but being a crafty kid, he quickly came up with a plan. When Ghost Maru was training, he found his gear had mysteriously disappeared, and seeing the provocative note left by Iron Sword, he was so angry his teeth hurt. Following the trail of his missing gear, Ghost Maru soon found Iron Sword lounging on the rooftop, though the journey was full of traps, each more dangerous than the last. Even after all the trouble, Ghost Maru still didn't want to fight. He just wanted his equipment back. When Ghost Maru refused to accept the challenge, Iron Sword simply tossed his helmet off the roof, yelling, "Idiot!" Because of Iron Sword's endless mischief, the two became true rivals, and whenever Ghost Maru had a moment to himself, all he could think of was Iron Sword's grinning face. Since the other seemed to be asking for a beating, Ghost Maru decided to go and teach him a lesson he'd never forget. But when he arrived at Iron Sword's house, he was told Iron Sword wasn't home. Ready to go back, Ghost Maru accidentally stepped on Silver Tiger's tail, and the angry tiger lunged at him, forcing Ghost Maru to give it a good thrashing. When he learned that Iron Sword had gone to his own house, he rushed home, only to find the attic empty. After seeing Iron Sword coming from his house, the truth was obvious. Meanwhile, Iron Sword returned home to see Silver Tiger all beat up, and now the two were truly enemies for life, almost as if connected by fate. The two men, both on a mission to settle scores with each other, ran into one another midway, and their clash ignited chaos from Nantian Gate all the way to Penglai East Road. Wherever they went, chickens flew, dogs jumped, and mayhem followed. Perhaps pushed into a corner, Iron Sword suddenly switched to using props in battle, and while Ghost Maru swung his sword to shatter every wooden board flying his way, the moment he slashed through the last piece, he discovered Iron Sword had vanished. But hidden behind that very plank, Iron Sword seized the perfect opportunity to ambush him. Though Iron Sword technically won the duel, Grandma scolded him for using such dishonorable tactics. Deep down, despite his usual goofy mannerisms, Iron Sword was sincere at heart, and he immediately admitted his mistake, promising that next time he would defeat Ghost Maru, fair and square. Since his junior was too weak to help in training, Iron Sword came up with the idea of practicing blindfolded to sharpen his sixth sense. In fact, he'd already unknowingly started heading down this path earlier. His methods may have been absurd, but the results turned out right, proving that even fools have their fortune. Iron Sword, being as stubborn as ever, insisted on staying blindfolded not just while eating, but even while bathing. This finally pushed Saya over the edge. Having been defeated by Iron Sword twice, Ghost Maru was haunted by his shame. He had never tasted defeat before, and losing to such a shameless guy was hard to accept. While training in the courtyard, he stumbled upon a secret passage and, after climbing a long staircase, arrived at what looked like a temple. In the center of it stood a sword, and he realized it was his family's secret chamber, housing the legendary Divine Wind Sword, said to grant immense power to whoever could draw it. Guided by mysterious whispers and driven by his hatred for Iron Sword, Ghost Maru pulled the sword, and in a flash of light, he transformed. The old man never imagined that after worshipping his goddess for 400 years, she'd be snatched away by some clueless kid he'd just met. Such is the cruelty of fate. Seeing Ghost Maru now sprouting horns, even the male lead didn't recognize him at first, but as a battle maniac, he wouldn't back down from the provocation. It was only when they clashed that he realized Ghost Maru had abandoned all martial ethics and was using a real blade. When the male lead called him out, Ghost Maru just sneered. After all, he wasn't human anymore and didn't need to follow human rules. All he wanted now was to tear the male lead to pieces. While dodging an attack, the male lead grabbed a steel pipe, and for a moment it seemed they were on equal footing, until he realized just how wrong he was. The speed of the Divine Wind Sword was beyond what the eye could follow, but luckily, the male lead had been training his spiritual senses, and blindfolded, he could still sense his opponent's position and aura. His unexpected combo moves caught Ghost Maru off guard, but the advantage didn't last. When Ghost Maru raised the sword, a wild gust slammed the male lead hard against a wall. Facing this unbeatable version of Ghost Maru, the male lead realized his only hope was to slice through the wind. But dreams are one thing, reality another. He couldn't cut the wind, and even lost his only weapon to the storm. Seeing him defenseless, Ghost Maru went in for the kill. With one strike, he sliced the building in two. At the last second, Master Zhuang intervened and saved him. Shattered, the male lead cried his heart out, knowing he stood no chance. That's when his unreliable dad, Iron Wolf, showed up. After understanding the situation, Iron Wolf told him that the only way to beat the Divine Wind Sword was with the Thunder God's Sword, a weapon so powerful that when drawn, the sky would change color and the earth would tremble. To find it, he'd need to seek out an old man named Gongde Musashi on Tengu Mountain. Even if he got the sword, it would take years to master. But the male lead, being headstrong, was willing to go through fire and water just to defeat Ghost Maru. Though he didn't know the way, Saya was a local, so the next morning they set out together. Rushing out without breakfast, the male lead hunted a wild boar to eat. But before they could finish, a strange old man interrupted and in just 2.5 seconds devoured the whole boar himself. Then he revealed his identity. He was none other than Gongde Musashi, the very man they were searching for. After learning their purpose, he led them to his forest and explained that he had been waiting 400 years for the sword's chosen one. While he and the male lead argued, sharp-eyed Saya spotted the Thunder God's sword nearby. Eager to get home for lunch, the male lead tried to grab it quickly, but the moment he touched it, he got electrocuted into a puddle. Gongde mocked him with sarcastic jabs. As the two argued, the foolish male lead sneakily pulled the sword out. Seeing this, Gongde felt utterly defeated, his 400-year devotion snatched away by a complete stranger. The male lead tried to test the sword's power, but immediately got knocked out. To wield the Thunder God's sword, he first had to defeat the power of the Thunder God sealed within. Not one to be discouraged, he challenged it right away. Thunder boomed as lightning flashed, and the male lead, overtaken by the sword's power, turned into a berserk menace. Gongde stepped in and coolly knocked him out in one strike. It seemed the Divine Wind Sword sensed the disturbance and grew restless, and at the same time, Ghost Maru learned of the Thunder God's sword from his family's secret scroll. A child may choose one, but an adult wants everything. Through Gongde's explanation, they finally understood, whether it's the Wind Sword or Thunder Sword, if one can't resist the evil in their heart, they'll be consumed and become a demon. But the male lead, ever resilient like a cockroach, wouldn't give up. He was determined not only to master the Thunder God's sword, but also to use it to defeat Ghost Maru. Meanwhile, a woman who appeared to be a charming beauty on the surface was, in truth, a snake demon with young, sharp fangs. And to expand her gang's reach, Ghost Maru, using a secret technique, summoned the 8 Ghost Lords along with a swarm of tiny, footed demonettes. And now with a massive army under his command, his ambition swelled rapidly. Without a word, he took control of Bohui. Meanwhile, the male lead remained completely unaware of the crisis ahead. To help him grow stronger, Gongben instructed him to train until he could walk on water like it was solid ground. At first, the male lead thought it was an impossible fantasy, but after Gongbin effortlessly demonstrated the skill, he had no choice but to drop his attitude and start practicing. To help the male lead carry the Thunder God sword wherever he went, Gongbin even custom crafted a sword bridge just for him. At the same time, two uninvited guests arrived at the treehouse, led by a woman claiming to be an old acquaintance of Gongbin. Simple-hearted Saya didn't think much of it and welcomed them in. After some awkward small talk, the male lead and others finally returned from training. The moment the lecherous old Gongbin saw the beautiful woman, his eyes went wide. But in the next instant, the male lead was smacked across the room by an absurdly long tongue. The pretense was dropped instantly. They were revealed as two of Ghost Maru's 8 ghost lords. The one in the red robe was Frogman, and the alluring mature woman was actually Snake Man, Slick Slippery Tamatha III. Because Snake Man's name was too funny, the male lead and Saya burst out laughing, even during battle. Gongbin explained this was a filial sword tactic, disrupt the enemy with laughter to gain the upper hand. As Snake Man and Frogman joined the fight, chaos erupted across the entire Northwest. During a scramble for the Thunder God sword, the male lead accidentally drew it and was immediately consumed by its power, turning into a demon. Although Gongbin managed to interrupt the spell, it had little effect, and the now maddened male lead slashed the entire treehouse into a blazing inferno. Maybe because Frogman was the biggest target, the berserk male lead immediately locked onto him. Just as Frogman was about to be slain, Gongbin jumped in to block the attack. Shocked by the gesture, Frogman immediately agreed to cooperate with Gongbin. When the male lead saw Frogman, he instinctively began transforming into his demon state again, only to realize the Thunder Pearl was missing and the Thunder God's sword had become nothing more than an ordinary blade. Snake Man had snatched the Thunder Pearl from Saya and now threatened the male lead to hand over the sword too. With a hostage at stake, the male lead was hesitant. Snake Man ordered Frogman to attack, but remembering how Gongbin just saved him, Frogman couldn't bring himself to strike. Sensing his teammate's betrayal, Snake Man moved to eliminate him, but the male lead blocked the attack in the nick of time, again and again and again, shielding the strike repeatedly. As the male lead tried to flee, Snake Man chased him relentlessly. Without the Thunder Pearl, the male lead had no power to fight back and was thoroughly outmatched. But during one of the attacks, he unexpectedly discovered the whirlwind slash technique. The Thunder God's sword spun at incredible speed like a deadly saw blade, and the battle flipped instantly. The hunter became the hunted as the male lead chased down the enemy's mini-demons. Seeing the tide turn, Snake Man grabbed the Thunder Pearl and tried to escape, but the male lead wasn't about to let him go. To Gongbin's credit, even after the male lead burned down his centuries-old home, he didn't complain. Instead, he generously took in the now homeless Frogman. Upon hearing that Ghost Maru had taken over Bohui, Gongbin decided to take the male lead to Ganryu Island to seek help from Sasaki Kojiro. So the group, 4 people, 1 tiger, and 1 bird, set off for Ganryu Island. Under the spinning storm blades, Huo Yunnan was defeated in just under 2.5 minutes. Seeing their power was no match for the male lead, Spider-Man changed tactics, opting for strategy over force. They first took control of a hot spring inn, using a mix of persuasion and intimidation, then laid a trap by tricking the male lead into thinking he won a prize and inviting him for a free soap. But the male lead, being a training-obsessed lunatic, refused to part with his sword even in the bath. Meanwhile, Saya sensed someone spying on them and suspected the male lead at first, though the clueless boy didn't even understand what was going on. Turns out it was the lecherous Gongbin who schemed to have the male lead distract the girls while he peeked from below. Meanwhile, the trio from the 8 Ghost Lords were holding an urgent meeting. Seeing that the male lead never let go of the Thunder God's sword, they devised a cunning plan. They invited him to a courage testing contest with the legendary Honey Spring as the reward, a magical hot spring said to relieve fatigue and enhance beauty. Saya immediately accepted the invitation. When they arrived at the meeting point, they saw the stern-faced Starfish Man standing there. Saya thought it was just a guy in a mascot suit and had no idea he was one of the 8 Ghost Lords. The rules of the game were simple: walk a set path without looking back. After the rules were explained, Starfish Man finally revealed his intention: to get the male lead to hand over the Thunder God sword so they could protect it. But the male lead instantly refused. Help cries echoed, and it turned out the old injured granny was actually Tong Wang Nan in disguise. He had planned to lure the male lead close by pretending to need support, but the male lead, sharp as ever, sensed something off. After all, that grandma's acting was too exaggerated. When the male lead didn't fall for it, Tong Wang Nan, growing anxious, tore off the disguise and tried to attack. But in the very next second, he was smacked in the head by the upturned Thunder God sword. After the male lead and Saya left, Starfish Man hurried over to check and found Tong Wang Nan unconscious. Soon, the two passed through a forest filled with dangling konjac. These slimy things were meant to scare people, but instead of being frightened, they were just grossed out. Starfish Man clearly intended to blend in and steal the Thunder God's sword, but as he walked, he realized he'd stepped on something: his own teammate. With everyone else down, Starfish Man had to act alone. When the male lead and the others reached reached the end, they found a huge boulder with a small note on it saying, "Please insert the sword." Being obedient, the male lead didn't think much and followed the instructions. Once the sword was inserted, Starfish Man boldly stepped out, having no more reason to hide. The male lead instinctively tried to pull the sword back out, but no matter how hard he tried, it wouldn't budge, because Starfish Man had already smeared super glue all over the cave. Now, without a weapon, the male lead was like a tiger without fangs. At that moment, the rest of the team, who had vanished earlier, reappeared, and Saya finally realized they were all members of the 8 ghosts. Starfish Man, seeing the male lead refuse to cooperate, tried to snatch the sword by force. The comical trio attempted a last-ditch struggle, but were suddenly blasted into the sky by a geyser of hot spring water. Turns out the legend of the honey spring was true. When the trio regained consciousness, they found themselves back in their room. The male lead and his team hadn't taken advantage of them. On the contrary, they had helped treat their injuries. This unexpected kindness moved them deeply. Inspired by the male lead's sincerity, they decided to abandon evil and return to their families. When Ghost Maru found out his subordinates had betrayed him, he flew into a rage and, to secure the Thunder God Sword, summoned the highest ranking of the 8 ghosts, Dracula, the most powerful among them. Dracula wasn't just a master swordsman, he could also fly, and worst of all, anyone he bit became a mindless blood vessel. The moment he appeared, Guts instantly sensed this was no ordinary foe. His instincts were correct. When the male lead clashed with Dracula, blood flew immediately. With wings, Dracula could change direction mid-air, giving him a terrifying edge. To make up for his own shortcomings, the male lead fused with Master Zhuang's ring, gaining wings himself. The aerial duel that followed was intense, the two exchanging blow after blow in a fierce back and forth. Hoping to end the fight quickly, the male lead used his whirlwind slash, but forgot about Master Zhuang right behind him. In that moment of distraction, Dracula lifted his size 42 armored boot and kicked the male lead out of the sky. As Dracula moved in to finish him, Guts stepped in and blocked the attack. Though aged, the old man's strength hadn't left him. Dracula pretended to flatter him, but then took a chance and bit Guts hard, turning him into a blood vessel too. When the male lead woke up again, only Saya and the 2 little ones remained by his side. Following the ancient tactic of retreat as the best strategy, the male lead jumped on Master Zhuang's back with Saya to escape. Left behind, Silver Tiger became Dracula's next target. To shake off Dracula, Master Zhuang stepped up and sacrificed himself to hold the enemy off, allowing the male lead and Saya to fall into a river. With Master Zhuang now a converted enemy, the male lead felt completely cornered. He asked Saya for the Thunder Pearl, but she refused. If the male lead went berserk, no one could stop him. He understood it was reckless, but he was desperate. As they argued, the relentless Dracula found them again. In a flash, they were surrounded by little black demons. Just when capture seemed inevitable, classmate Shadow Tiger made a heroic entrance. While fleeing, the male lead picked a tall building as their final battleground. But no matter where they ran, Dracula always seemed to find them, as if he had a tracker on them. Spotting a brief opening, the male lead slashed with a furious, mountain-cracking roar. Dracula blocked it, but his goggles were shattered. Now enraged, Dracula went wild. After dodging for what felt like forever, they reached the rooftop, but in his panic, the male lead dropped the Thunder God Sword. Saya tried to retrieve it, only to find it far heavier than expected. Luckily, Shadow Tiger swooped in just in time and carried it across rivers and mountains. Meanwhile, the unarmed male lead had been cornered. At the critical moment, Saya's duo arrived, sword in hand. The male lead instinctively tried to use his whirlwind slash, but Dracula anticipated it and sealed the move's hole with a black orb. The male lead froze. His only technique had just been sealed. Still, the fight had to go on. What followed was a one-sided slaughter, until the Thunder Pearl reflected sunlight straight into Dracula's eyes, causing him to hesitate. Seizing the moment, the male lead tore off the rooftop. With Dracula defeated, everyone returned to normal, and the male lead, through this brutal battle, finally realized the limits of his own strength.